All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Creative Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Bailey Wishart, and if you're a regular attendee of Soulfest, then you'll probably recognize today's guest. He's shared the stage with artists like Aaron Gillespie, Switchfoot, Skillet. In 2020, he was named the next big thing by the We Love Christian Music Awards, and his newest single, All I Want, is available right now on all your favorite streaming platforms. I've been playing it nonstop, so you guys got to get on that if you haven't heard it yet. Beyond all that, what I'm most excited about is he's an artist that's passionate about Jesus and about using his art to point people to the heart of God. So I would love to give a warm welcome to James Collington. James, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bailey. It's so good to be here. It's nice to finally meet you too after like 5 years of me harassing you. So yeah.
No, it's all good. I'm sure the harassment was mutual, and it didn't feel like harassment at all. It felt like a friendship. So I'm glad that for the listeners that might be a little bit concerned as to what's going on, there was no actual harassment, but met James via the social media world due to a playlist that I made one time, and now his music's on it, and I love listening to it. So I'm glad you reached out that one time. Bumped up my
of course.
Bumped up my playlist a lot, so I love it too. And I love to just kick off every show, honestly, just by diving into each guest story. So kind of like you said, I'm just excited even just to hear more of your story on a personal level. But now I get to hear it and the whole world gets to hear it. So if you want to just share a little bit of just how you found faith, how you got started with the creative arts, and where those two things really started to intersect in your life.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So clearly you've been reading my Wikipedia page and whoever's been updating that. So let me fill you in with what's not on there. And so my name is James. I grew up in a little state called Rhode Island. It's the smallest state with the longest name, and it's also 4% bigger at low tide. So that's always our fun claim to fame. Awesome. And I live cross country now, but that's where I grew up, and grew up in a single parent home with my mom. And she was kind of, the deal was, if you live in my house, you're going to go to church, kind of thing. And
it's a good deal.
To be honest with you, I didn't want anything to do with it, and I was just making a lot of bad choices. And for me, I think kind of the rub was, there's a few things. I think one, I had a hard time. It was like, how do I reconcile this pain and just kind of the brokenness I was experiencing in my life and my family with Jesus? And then two, like I felt kind of, I didn't understand the depth of God's love and just the transformation that was on the table the whole time. And for me, I just was like, I'm really not interested in pretending, and I don't really know what to do with this. I just didn't really want anything to do with it at all, because it just wasn't real to me. And so around the age of 16, God kind of gave me the old flank. I was just really in my, probably my most broken spot. I'd really hurt a lot of people in my life. I'd made a lot of mistakes. Yeah. And it was in that time that the Lord really kind of spoke to me for the first time. I was like, I love you, right? And for me, that just changed everything for me. Because at that time, I was in a spot like they say there's no love like a mother's love, and my mom was like one step from me having lived under a bridge or something like that, because she was so fed up for me. Yeah. So for the fact that God really spoke to me in that time, that kind of really changed my life. And but that was just like my initial kind of moment. My encounter, if you will. And from there, I needed people to hold my feet to the fire. So I wouldn't be still walking with Jesus if it wasn't for the mentors and the people that God's always brought into my life. Scripture says that God puts the lonely in families, and God has always just had a spiritual father for me, spiritual mom for me, just someone to come alongside of me and, hold my feet to the fire when I was being a knucklehead and wanting to date weird people or missionary date and just make really self-destructive decisions. So yeah, thank you, everybody.
I know for me, when it comes to like the time where the most maybe like transformation has happened is because I was probably at a very personal low, but there were people that were willing to like, not just like pat me on the back and be like, oh, hey, are you okay? But it's like, no, we're going to like pick you up. And it's like, I'm going to come down to where you are, but I'm not going to let you stay there, And I think that's where I've seen a lot of the transformation in my life. So I think that's such a key thing, is like mentorship is like sometimes an underrated part of people's story, right? Because I think so much of the, you're focused on, okay, this is where I was and this is where God brought me. And it's like, but God used people to bring you there, So I love that. I love that shout
Yeah.
out. That's super cool.
Thanks, Bailey.
Well, sweet. Yeah. And then I know, so I mentioned at the top of the show, you just dropped your most recent single. So I'd even love to dive into that a little bit and, maybe even talk about, okay, like, where did this music journey start for you? And then like, what are some projects that you've been working on that you're really excited about right now, whether that's All I Want or even other stuff coming up on the horizon?
Yeah. So I'll let some cats out of the bag for you
Love it.
because I owe you that. You always get the cats
I
early.
love it.
But before that, we got to keep people engaged. So I'll share everything else. Yeah. So for me, like I had a weird childhood. I didn't own a CD till I was like a teenager.
Oh, wow.
My first CD that my dad gave me was Sergeant Pepper, and then my mom took it away because it was about drugs. So that was, gives you a gist of the kind of home I grew up. And yeah, so it was just kind of, for me, like when I came to know Jesus, I mean, this was like peak emo phase. So like if I was in the 80s, it would have been like the equivalent of me being like a metalhead and like, there's some things you got to lay down so that your identity is in Jesus and not things.
Right.
And so the equivalent of the 80s dude is shaving off your mullet and getting rid of your jean jacket. But for me, I shaved all my emo hair and I wasn't straightening it anymore. Yeah. And I bought some looser pants and I got rid of all my CDs. But I really just felt convicted, like that it was holding me back. So I was like, all right, that's what we got to get rid of. That's what we got to get rid of. And so for me, at that moment, like, I'll be honest with you, like I mentioned, I was kind of making a lot of bad decisions and really being self-destructive in a lot of ways. So that when I'm like 16, we're talking like 2 years later, I'm graduating high school.
Right.
And it's like up till this point, I've been kind of messing around. It's like, I don't know what to do, God. And a verse that gets a lot of flack from people is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And I know what people say and I really don't care. But for me, it's just, I always have taken that very literally. Yeah. And for me, it was just like, okay, God, like you did this work in my life and I don't have a plan now. Like I need you to have a plan. And so I probably went down to every response time, every altar call at every church service I could for a while. And I really wasn't hearing much, to be honest with you. And then finally I went down to this altar call and this guy prayed over me. He's like, I just feel like the Lord wants to use you for music, specifically drumming.
Wow.
Or excuse me, specifically singing. That's and cool. For me, I was a drummer at that time. So that was like, I was like trying to negotiate and barter with it. I was like, maybe he got the music part right. And, I was just waiting for like this tour bus to randomly pull up one day and load my drums in and sail off in the sunset. And that never happened. So I was like, all right, let me try doing some songs or writing some songs. And I don't know, it was just crazy, Bailey. Like the momentum, it's just not something I could have taken credit for. Like as soon as I made that decision, like people were like, hey, can I record you?
Wow.
Or like I prayed for a guitar and then, cause I didn't own a guitar. And then I prayed for a guitar and I prayed for a piano or a keyboard. So someone gave me both of those.
That's amazing.
And right. And it's like, I can't take credit for it. And it's always been kind of like this snowball of, just things that I can't take credit for. And, I mean, sometimes it's frustrating because it's like, I wish I was self-made and my next step was dependent on me just having some hustle and some grind, but it's just really not. And the good part is I'm not in control, but the bad part is I'm not in control. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I've totally been there. It's it's that balance of, you know that God's a good driver, but you still would like to maybe be the one navigating. And it's
absolutely.
God's an all or nothing kind of God. So, that compromise isn't really there. That's funny that, even just like hearing like, okay, like you heard singing, right? Like from, and it's like, you're like, okay, but I'm a drummer. So what does that look like? And and God even just being like, no, like we're going to bring a whole new instrument into your life. We're going to completely take this passion that you have for music, but we're going to turn this around into something that you can't have control of because your dreams aren't big enough to match the dreams that I have for you, you know? So I think that
Yeah.
that's super cool.
Thanks, Bailey.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the start, right? And now, I mean, I think even just like looking back, you know, it's like talk about humble beginnings to seeing where God's brought you now. What are you kind of was I guess like if you were to give like the Spark Notes version of kind of from that moment to now to what you're looking forward to, what would that look like?
From then to now, I mean, in terms of what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think maybe with a little bit of the reflection of what God did, because it sounds like God's done a lot in that time period. Just from
Yeah.
it's probably too much to sum up on one podcast, but I'll have to do a part two.
Well, no, yeah, we could do part two
I'm
too.
always down for part two.
I mean, if you got the budget, you know my rate. So,
Absolutely.
um, no, I mean, for me, I think, you know, people, I think a lot of times are like, look in their giftings for their calling.
Mm,
And for me, God called me to do something I was not gifted at
that's
all.
good.
And,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that about my singing and about my singing, present tense and past tense, there, it's like, it was, there's a craft element of it. It was brutal.
Mm,
There are songs you will never hear. And it was kind of like a lot of just trying to figure it out. Cause like I've got a pretty unique voice. And for me, it was sing with this
yeah.
voice, like, and just trying to figure it out. And I was really self-conscious. And it took me about like 6 years of just eating crap before I figured out my voice. And it's, I don't know if I can say that word crap,
You could
but
say it.
anyway,
We're not too
all right,
religious
good.
here.
And so good. And so, for me, it was, there's a craft element of something I had to consistently develop. And, I don't think if I hadn't known that the Lord had kind of called me to it, then I don't think I would have been able to stick it through that kind of growth period, because it was very difficult.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like this thing where it's just like, oh, I'm awesome at this. Of course I'm called to it. And not only was it, but the thing I'm really grateful about it is that it staggered my limitations, staggered my growth in a sense,
Wow.
where there's a lot of things that if like they had happened the way they had happened, I would be a train wreck right now. And um, I've heard it put this way. Like I was talking to a friend of mine out east once, and he was saying, he's like, I'm a landlord. I own multiple properties, and someday these properties, they're going to belong to my kids. And if I gave them to them right now, it would crush them. It would absolutely
Yeah.
destroy them. And as a father, it's my job to make sure they're ready for their inheritance. I believe that's how God is with our callings,
Hmm.
is that he's not just going to dump something on us. He cares more about what's being developed in us than, like if the reality is like, if God wanted me somewhere else, I would be somewhere else.
That's so
If
good.
God wanted me to have something else, I would have something else. But if both those things are not true, then I'm right where I am for a reason right now. And I need to lean into that and stop being so discouraged.
That's so good. That's that's super powerful. There's kind of like when you were kind of describing that, I was thinking of like Moses, how he was like God called him to be a leader first, and he was like,
Mm,
I've got, I think, I've got a speaking impediment. I can't, like I've never led anyone in my life. I am on the run from people in Egypt. Like I am the last guy that you need for this. And it's like God didn't wait for Moses to get his crap together
yeah.
to put him in that position. It's like God was like, no, like by me putting you in this position, the least qualified person for this, who's going to get the glory? Look at it and it's like, that couldn't be anyone but God. So I think that
Yeah.
that's a cool aspect to it as well. Yeah. So I'm just seeing, I'm seeing a little bit of Moses in your story right now. It's cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Need a beard.
I I feel like the Prince of Egypt really made Moses look way cooler than he actually probably looked. But man,
Maybe.
when he had that beard and like the curls on the top, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this guy looks like he could be like a Disney prince at this point. So it was pretty cool.
It's putting the shalom in the home. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. Um, well, awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about All I Want, if you're down. Just even, I
No.
feel like having listened to the song a little bit, I feel like there's even just pieces of, the themes that I pick up in the lyrics that relate a lot back to some of what you're talking about of just, wanting what God wants. And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to just even dive into that a little bit and talk about kind of the process behind that. And yeah,
I probably should plan to have a better answer for this, but
you're good.
I don't remember writing the song.
You are all good.
It's kind of like the Keith Richards of my songs. I've just had it around for a while, and I don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I remember writing it in a time period where I was just kind of just pumping out songs. And for me, I was under a lot of pressure at the time. I had labels watching me for the first
Wow.
time. Like I was doing meetings in Nashville, and for me, it was all in response to a song that I put out, and it was a song that wasn't necessarily had nothing to do with Jesus, to be honest with you. Um, and so that was the song everybody was interested in. And for me, during that period, I just became very, I would say convicted, or just had a lot going on in my heart where it was just like, there was quite a few things that all just kind of put me in this spot where it's just like, my relationship with the Lord comes first, the presence of God comes first, and I just need to prioritize that. Everybody's all about balances and stuff like that, but balance is a myth, and it comes down to priorities. And
That's fire.
like, I can't negotiate this thing where it's like, I put Jesus first, but I'm willing to compromise and find a balance for this label. It's a priority. It's like, Jesus, you're my first priority. And if a label happens to fit the way I'm going with you, then that's great. Because it's like Peter walking on water. Like when my eyes are on Jesus, things go remarkably well
Yeah.
for me in my life. But when I start taking and looking at other things, it's not really that way. You know what I mean? And it could be just as simple as like, when you're regularly going to church, it's like, why do things seem like they're just going better for some reason? That's weird. That doesn't make sense. It's like Tylenol, you hurt your back or hurt something, and then you take some and you feel better, and you're like, oh, I don't need this anymore. And then you stop taking it and you're in pain.
Yeah.
Just Jesus is the Tylenol. And
That's awesome.
so it's just really, that's just been the heartbeat shift. And I think because of that, I left the potential to have offers on the table, because it was a really hard pivot. And for me, it was just, I've never really talked about this like this. There was just quite a few things that came up where it's just like, I just had to get first things first. And I just, someday I'm going to have to give an account for everything I do. And the reality is that music doesn't age well, and it ages kind of like milk. There's very few exceptions where it ages like wine, like the Beatles or something like that, or even literature. It's like not everybody has timeless works. And for me, at the end of my life, I'm gonna have to give an account for everything I do. And it would be really scary for me to be able to make something work, make a career out of it, and then still miss the point. So it's been a lot of getting back to square one.
That's really powerful. I love how you said balance is a myth. It's just about your priorities. And like, I think someone needed to hear that, because like, it's so, I feel like, especially with it's the hustle culture that we live in, where it's just it's all about stacking your resume and what more could I do? I need to do more. I need to do more. And we kind of become more of a human doings than we are human beings. And
Mm,
yeah, I think it's like if the relationship with the Lord is not at the very, very top of that priorities list, then like everything else that you try and fill up your time with, it's gonna leave you burnt out. And I think beyond burnt out, I think it's gonna, like you said, like when you have to give an account at the end of your life. I mean, I that's real convicting to me because I don't want to sit before God and have him be like, what were you doing all that time? I want to,
yeah.
I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. But I think it's less about what we do and more about what we prioritize. So I think that's a really great point. Um, and so I think just to kind of dive into some more of these questions, just reflecting back on your story, like I think you really do touch on that idea of like surrendering to Jesus's plan for your life, dying to yourself. What do you think it looks like for a creative to surrender total control to Jesus and like submit to his plan for their life?
I think it just looks like surrender. Um, Bible says we are living sacrifices. And in the words of Rick Warren, a living sacrifice can walk off the altar at any time. So it's a daily
Yeah.
decision and a continually laying down. And for me, I didn't choose this medium. I would have been happy to go to Bible school like I thought I was supposed to and
Hmm.
just be a pastor or something like that. And so really, it's just about surrender. Promotion comes from God, and you don't have to go looking for it.
That's
Like
good.
just like David in the field, um, he wasn't in the house with his brothers trying to stand out the most, but it came to him. Like you're not going to miss out on what God has for you. You don't care more about ministry than Jesus does, and I think it's okay just relax, abide in His presence. That comes first, and um, if you seek first the kingdom of God and all His righteousness, all things will be added. And in my 33 years of living, He hasn't made a liar out of Himself with that.
That's
So
good. Yeah, no, I think that's so key too, right? It's like, you know, we're when we're getting our truth from the word, like, I mean, just knowing the word inside and out, which like, I mean, just how quickly you're able to call that to mind. Like, it seems like you do spend a lot of time in the word and it's like, if that's where we root our truth, like you can know like, okay, if I believe that God is not a liar, then I can trust X, Y, and Z, and everything's kind of laid out right there. And so it's less about knowing all of the fine, minute details of the plan that he's got laid out for you, and just more so, do I trust him? Am I going to take him at his word, or am I going to try and read things into this that put me in the driver's seat again? So I love that.
yeah, I think it's like Abraham. God told him what He was going to do, but He didn't tell him how.
Yeah.
And if we knew how God was going to do it, we'd put our faith more in that than God.
Hmm.
And really, He does. He speaks what He's going to do. He tells us what He's going to do before He does it, but He does it in a way that we can only do it by abiding in Him. And Abraham messed that up every way
Yeah.
possible. He made his own kid, and some people argue that there's world problems still from that to this day. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not a history buff like that, but it's it's just all about him. I just love that he sets it up that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something really powerful too in knowing, I think even just thinking of Abraham's example, and knowing in my own life, like there's a you can do a lot and you can try and veer yourself off the path that maybe God might have for you as much as you want or may not want, but accidentally do. But ultimately
Mm,
you're no human is powerful enough to stop God's plans for them. We're
yeah,
not that powerful. And I find a lot of comfort in that. Just because I think sometimes it is very easy to be like, you know, okay, well, I've already kind of screwed up. Like if you had walked away from, um, that moment, hearing that God was going to use your voice for ministry and been like, well, I'm going to do drums, and then be like, moment that God gives us the dream, and then the moment we get to see that dream fully realized, there's a lot longer of a time period in between those 2 points in time that maybe we would plan or hope for. So for the creative
Yeah.
who's maybe struggling with perseverance while waiting to see God like really capitalize on the dream that he's placed in your heart, what would be like the practical advice that you would give that creative?
I don't know that this is the most encouraging thing,
It's
but
all good.
God doesn't necessarily, in my experience, pay co-sign on bills that he didn't. You know what I mean?
That's
If
good.
when you walk in the vision of God, the provision always follows. And
That's
we're
fire.
wondering why God's not co-signing on
Yeah.
things he never asked us to do. And so my first thing is because God, I don't believe that God wants us to be frustrated right
Mm-hmm.
now and just waiting for something to happen that could or may not happen. Like, I don't think that that's his intention, to live in that place of kind of chaos and confusion and frustration. Uh, and I think it just comes back to that you are right where you are right now for a reason. God has something there for you. And if you're stuck, if you feel like you maybe got a little off, and it's never too late to get back on, like what you were saying,
Mm.
then recenter. But I don't, I don't know. I can't, anything following Jesus guarantees nothing else but Jesus. So I
Yeah.
can't tell you what to do for anything other than
Yeah.
that. So
No, that's fair.
yeah,
That's fair. That's fair. No, I love that. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head of like, it's not really up to us, and it's like, even when God has a dream or a plan for us, and we kind of get a glimpse of that, we don't really know how he's going to make it happen, or make it come to
we
fruition.
don't even know if he's going to do it in our
Yeah.
lifetime. You know, people in the Bible, Hebrews talks about, that died without seeing what God had promised them.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
can you still follow if that's the case, if you never see it? Like, what if like God tells you to write a book and then you die, and then 30 years later it's like, like Anne Frank's diary,
Yeah.
like how long ago later did they
Right.
find that? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? um
Absolutely.
you got to be cool.
For sure. I know, especially if nowadays, because if you're keeping a diary, it's probably digital, and there's a bunch of layers of encryption, and so if someone finds that, you have to be okay with them breaking into your computer, or having to deal with the FBI or something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. It's like, yeah, Jesus is the prize, right? What he can do for us shouldn't ever be what we're chasing. It's just chasing Jesus, and watch what he does with it. And what he does
yeah,
in our lifetime is always going to be greater than anything that we pursue on our own or try and make happen in our own strength. No matter what that looks
yeah,
like. And then also, I think on the back end, right? We can trust him to keep his promise in whatever timing he wants them to do it. But we know that at the very end of time, it's like, we'll be able to look back and see, okay, I saw exactly when Jesus promised that, and I saw exactly when it came to fruition, whether or not I was on this side of heaven or not. So I think that's a really good point. So I want to dive into a question just kind of about creative process, if that's cool.
yeah. What's up?
So first of all, we've talked a little bit about your music on the show so far, so I'm hoping the first thing that the audience does is hop to the links in the show notes to listen to your stuff. But um, specifically about your creative process, for you, what would you say is like the correlation between your creative process and your relationship with God? Like, would you say, do you feel more like your relationship with God gets deeper as you engage with the creativity that he's given you? Or is it vice versa, where like the deeper you go with God, you feel like your creativity strength?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely an overflow thing. And with that, the reward is never the song, it's the relationship. And so it's just kind of this open-handed thing where the the pressure is off. You know what I mean? Like, for me, I believe the veil is torn, and
Mm,
that means I don't need a song to get to Jesus.
good.
It's just a vehicle. And if the vehicle's not working, I'll walk. And if
That's
that's not
great.
working, I'll get on a plane. Like, there's different vehicles. But then more than that, I think the thing that makes Christianity awesome is that it's not about what we did to go to God. It's about that he came to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I mean, a big part of my writing process is, I feel like I can be a little stubborn and stuff like that. And it's like, I need to have a really bad day to write a song or something like
Yeah.
that, or something really has to kind of prime my emotions. And, I mean, even like the last song, All I Want, like, it wasn't until I had some stuff happen that I was like, all right, I should probably record this.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'd kind of put it off. But, yeah, so that's kind of my process. Songwriting, I usually try to, I mean, if it's something's not coming in like 10 minutes, then I'll usually just walk away from it. There's nothing that's going to
Good point.
happen. But I don't care anymore. Like after a week,
Yeah.
I've moved on. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of co-writing either. Just because co-writing for the sake of co-writing for me is just a tremendous waste of time and energy and resources. And it usually just feels slimy because people are weird. And but I've been, especially in this process, I've been able to kind of write with some people that I really appreciate and admire.
That's
And it
awesome.
was more of just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, and it doesn't like, because I get stuck, you know what I mean? Versus like, let's fart out a hit in 4 hours, and then you just come up with this horrible song and
Yeah.
you're out 4 hours, and yeah, awkward relationship.
Yeah. It's more, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head when you were like, you're not creating something just for the sake of creating something, just to get it out and get it done and over with. I think there's a much different and not as genuine aspect of creation, I think, that goes into that versus versus letting whatever is on your heart drive the creation of whatever happens to be made in that moment. And that's like, I think where, sometimes inspiration hits, and I mean, again, I'm not in the music field, but for film and video and stuff like that, it's like sometimes I will that happens when I invite him into it first, because it's about the relationship with him and not about what I'm making. So, yeah,
Good.
yeah,
Preach.
love it. Well, I know you are on, like we said at the beginning, you're on dad time. So, I just want to thank you again for
DST, Dad Standard Time.
Standard Time. I love it. But yeah, I just want to thank you again for hopping on the show today, especially taking the time out of your day. This conversation honestly was like such a blessing to me. Like I said, just even getting to know you better, and
let's do it again.
Absolutely. Whether or not there's a podcast involved, let's do it again. But yeah, cannot wait for this conversation to hopefully bless others, and just thank you for setting an example for other believers on how to obey the Lord in your creativity. I'm really like believing that someone's going to hear that and it's going to change their life. So, yeah, thank you for being here. And to the listeners, if you haven't yet, go stream All I Want by Collington wherever you stream music. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. If you're blessed by today's episode, go ahead and give this episode specifically a rating or a review. It's the #1 way to get this podcast in front of other creatives just like you. And that'll do it for today. So I will catch you guys next time. And until then, keep creating.